because I think you can tell that there's an OR coming on. You can build it in dbt-021. That's one step, producing one run results.json with all your seeds, your tests, your models, your snapshots. Put simply, this build command is going to seed your seeds, run your models, test your tests, snapshot your snapshots, and do the whole thing in DAG order. This would be, say, in production, a full DAG build, just unqualified DBT build. But you could also build a specific model, which really means run that model and then immediately test it. Make sure that it doesn't just run successfully, but it actually has the data that you want it to. Tests become a lot more important when you're thinking in terms of DAGs and in terms of building those DAGs. You could also imagine building everything that's modified in a given pull request. Even if it's just that one seed file at the very beginning, we're going to build all the way down the subgraph, including even the snapshot if you want it. Though there's ways to exclude it if you don't. Or selection criteria that's exactly as complex as you can manage. I feel like YAML selectors, a feature that came out in 018, one of my personal favorites, are going to be even more powerful when you can build across many different resource types. So in this case, we've got a pretty funny selector. Let's be picky. We only want table models and the tests on them, but only the unique tests. If you list them, this is what you'd get. And if you build them, this is what you'd get. The bigger picture here is that we're building atop the same solid foundations as always. Selection syntax, materialization logic that handles each one of these nodes independently. So your snapshot is going to work out, your model is going to work out, your tests are going to work out. But we want you to move up an abstraction. And the build command in this way is opinionated. It wants you to be thinking in terms of unified DAGs, holding tests in really high regard. They should be passing, maybe warning, because a failure is worth stopping for, worth interrupting everything downstream. And build has some pretty compelling opportunity to pair with blue-green deploys and think in terms of building and then deploying an entire DAG, an entire set of DBT resources all at once. It's also going to make the most of metadata by combining all of these different resources together and making sure that they exist in a unified view. Speaking of compelling views of DBT metadata, Bar, I want to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Jericho. What an introduction. So my name is Bar. For those who I haven't met, I'm a product manager here at DBT Labs, and I focus specifically on metadata. And so Jeremy talked a little bit about it, but I wanted to start with a first question, which is that metadata, it's this super buzzword, maybe depending on what circles you're hanging out in. I'd love if someone in the chat could help me define metadata. When you hear metadata, what do you think? There's some fish pun requests. Okay, I'll try to work them in. All right, I'm seeing no guesses about what metadata is, so glad we're talking about it today. Data about data, love it, Julia. That's probably the most common definition that I hear. Something like data about data or context about data. It's the set of information that describes the data. When I hear folks talk about metadata, it's sometimes paired with a bunch of other buzzy words with the promise that metadata can solve all the things, all the hard problems. And that maybe feels exciting, but also really, really broad. So when we talk about metadata at DBT Labs, what do we mean? There's a lot that we can do, all the things, but our starting point, the very first focus for the metadata team, is to leverage metadata to help DBT project maintainers and sometimes data consumers, people who benefit from that project, understand what's happening in DBT projects and how those projects are changing over time. We started talking about metadata all the way back in Coalesce last year, but now we're moving from theoretical conversations and some demos and closed betas into generally available product development and a committed team here. Ooh, I'm loving these metadata answers flowing in. Yeah, we put data on top of your data. So this is how we think about it today at DBT Labs. And one of our first steps as a team was to make the metadata that we have more accessible and usable. So as Jericho alluded to, what does that mean? We launched the DBT Cloud Metadata API a few weeks ago. Every time that DBT Cloud runs a project, it generates metadata. And we now serve a GraphQL API that supports arbitrary queries over this data. Now remember, our goal is to leverage metadata to help folks understand what's happening in their DBT projects. So the point of an API here is to allow us as DBT Labs to more easily and quickly build useful, performant products on top of our metadata. And we'll talk about some specific examples today. But it's not limited to just us. This API can allow partners to easily integrate with the context about DBT data and can allow customers to as well. And so let's take a look here at an example query for the API just to get used to what this API can do. Can anyone write in the chat guessing what a query like this would output? All right, I'm seeing some typing in the chat. Any guesses around this GraphQL query? I'm so excited. Several people are typing. How long a node takes and its test for the most recent run. Name, execution, test of your job's last run. Okay, yeah, so we don't need me here. So the answer is exactly that. For the most recent run for this job ID, give me all the models. And then for each model, give me its name, its execution time, and its tests. And then for each test, what actually happened? Did it fail? Did it pass? What happened there? And you don't have to believe me. I'll quickly share my screen. To show you this live. Great, it's showing up. So yeah, Julia's cheating. So here, let me run this exact query that we saw in the slides. I set up this kind of like fake job. And so what we see here is exactly what we would expect. We have this model name, and we see other model names down here. We have how long it took to execute, and then what are all the tests? And did they pass? Did something else happen? We have all that information right here. Next model, customers, this was the execution time, these were the tests on that model, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is cool. Maybe I don't know what execution time means, so I can actually, play around in here. We also have really in-depth documentation on our doc site. I can play around in here and say, what does execution time mean? And I have the definition right here. It's the total time elapsed during the execution of this model. I can see a bunch of other fields that I can select for. So maybe I want to know if a model was skipped. Let me add that skip Boolean and let me run it again. Okay, I see this model was not skipped. Customers was also not skipped. And so all I wanted to do here was just get our palette wet playing around with the API a little bit and showing you some of what it can do. Models are not the only thing that the API can query. It can also query sources, tests, exposures, all that good stuff. So I'm going to go back to the deck. All right. So let's go back and remember how we think about metadata today. We said that we want to leverage this metadata to help DBT project maintainers and sometimes data consumers understand what's going on in our projects. And so the API helps us do that. The very first use case that we built as DBT Labs on top of this API is a dashboard status tile. We've talked about this concept before, but we've made improvements, and now as of this Monday, it's available for anyone with access to the API to use. This tile, which is exactly what you see here, can be placed on a dashboard or anywhere that you can put an iframe. And it gives insight into the quality, so the DBT tests and the source freshness of the data that feeds into that dashboard. I've been working in data for a while, and even so, if I'm looking at a dashboard that I did not build, I usually have no idea whether or not the data I'm looking at is legit. And so this tile helps give DBT users, build trust internally about the data that folks are seeing in their dashboards. It gives me a sanity check that I can trust it, and it can reduce the back and forth between who built the dashboard and me. So here's an example where things are failing. As you can see here, we have a stale source, we have some tests that didn't pass, and when that happens, more granular information and context surfaces. If you click in to see details from the status tile, it takes you to a landing page where you can learn even more about the sources, the models, and tests that feed into the exposure. So let's pull it back for a second into what we just talked about. We'll make this very quick. So I'm going to share again GraphQL just so that it all connects together. So opening the graphical interface here, if I run this exposures query, and just as a reminder, if you aren't familiar with exposures let you define and describe a downstream use of your DBT project. So in this case, let's pretend that your exposure is describing a dashboard. So the output here is, hey, what are the parent sources? What are the sources that feed into the dashboard? And what are the models that do? And for those sources, when we checked source freshness, what happened? And for all the tests on those models, did they work? Essentially what this API query is getting at is, hey, are the sources in this dashboard fresh? Are the models tested? Is the data I'm looking at legit at all? And so having this API let us build the tile easily to answer those questions. I'm going to head back to the slide and just talk a little bit about what's next. So we said that what we care about is leveraging metadata to help folks understand what's happening in their projects. Today, we're investing in 2 work streams to make it happen. We have this API out in the wild, but we want to make it even better. We're particularly interested in investing in historical run information, something we don't have today. So that would unlock a bunch of use cases, like you could see how a model performed over time, or you could see what keeps failing, all that good stuff. We're also adding a lot more fields into the API so you can get the information you want. So for example, you might care about a PII column tag. We don't have that today. On top of that, we also want to build new product functionality on top of the API. So we showed you this dashboard status tile. Something we're working on right now is visualizing your model bottlenecks and making it really easy to know what models are taking the longest. There's a lot to look forward to here. I'm always happy to chat with anyone about metadata, dreams, and wishes. And I'm going to pass it off to Julia to talk about environment variables.
Thanks, Bar. I love the audience participation there. I'm Julia Schottenstein, and I'm the product manager for the shipments team. As a reminder, the shipments team focuses on product in DBT Cloud to help you operationalize your DBT deployments with confidence and ease. Our team is focused on delivering great experiences with the scheduler, environments, jobs, CI/CD, Git integrations, and more. We're planning on bringing environment variables to cloud. So I'm excited to share with you all today the basics of environment variables, why you should care, and a few motivating examples on how to use them in your DBT Cloud projects. Environment variables are like a more powerful cousin of variables. You can set them in your DBT project using the Jinja nvar function, which takes a key and an optional default value. The environment variable is then interpreted depending on where dbt is run. Environment variables can be used in so many ways, and they give you the power and flexibility to do what you want to do more easily in dbt Cloud. There are 3 levels of environment variables. You can set a project-wide default value, which can be overridden at the environment level, which can in turn be overridden again at the job level or in the IDE for an individual dev. With this level of granular control, you can solution any problem that your team might come up with. Here's a view of how I'll let you set environment variables at the project and environment level. You'll get this neat table where you can define new keys and specify how you want dbt to interpret each variable depending on the environment. We're next going to walk through some motivating examples on how you can use environment variables in dbt projects to hopefully spark your imagination on how you might want to use them. Imagine you want to specify your Snowflake warehouse connection dynamically based on your job workload. Some jobs, like a full refresh, might need the extra large warehouse, whereas other jobs, like an incremental job, will be just fine running in a medium warehouse. Simply specify the warehouse name as an environment variable and dynamically set the value at the job level. No more needing to create a separate environment for every warehouse size you need. How about cloning private packages? You can now do this easily by setting your Git token as an environment variable and constructing your repository HTTPS URL properly. Notice we've prefixed this environment variable with a special string, dbt env secret. Once dbt version 021 comes out later this month, we'll be sure to scrub any environment variables with this special prefix from the logs, and also you won't be able to read its value in plain text after it's been set in Cloud. We'll keep cruising through these examples. Many of you have gotten used to using target.name in dbt Cloud to create conditional model logic. Instead of using target.name, replace it with an environment variable. In this example, we only want to pull a subset of the data in our development environment, whereas in prod, we'll run the full model. This model will check environment variable called environment to determine what to do. Our final example is nothing new, but just a reminder that we have some special environment variables in dbt Cloud that will automatically get set at each job run. You can call these special environment variables to get the job ID, run ID, cloud run reason, and more. These environment variables are helpful in auditing your run metadata and can be used for data table organization. We hope that was plenty of motivation, and we're excited to hear about all the interesting ways you put environment variables to work in your dbt Cloud projects. We'll be onboarding anyone who is interested to the beta program on August 23rd. If you'd like to be involved, give us a shout in the dbt Slack. I know many of you have been itching for private package support in particular, so do not worry, it's not far away now. And before wrapping up, a final word of wisdom. We recommend 2 or 3 environments. A small number of environments can really go a long way. Dev, staging, and prod should do the trick. If you have some funky use cases, think about building separate jobs and keeping your environment numbers slim. At dbt Labs, we just have dev and prod environments for our internal analytics. We run CI jobs on every pull request to build our models into a temporary schema before we merge new code. If all our tests pass, the code is merged and the models build in prod. And that's all for me. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about what environment variables can do for you. And I'm going to turn it back over to Drew to take us home.
To take us home, I'll always think of John Denver. I got a couple slides, but really the thing we want to talk about here is, was staging Q3 useful? We love putting on this event every quarter. We've been doing it. I guess this is our 3rd iteration of it, if I'm not mistaken. And really, this came out of Coalesce and feedback we got last year, folks saying that wanted to hear more from our product team about what we're working on and how we're thinking about dbt and the ecosystem evolving. So if you love this, we'd love to hear about that. If there are things you think we can do differently that would make it more impactful and interesting, we'd definitely love to hear about that too. There's a survey link that someone can drop in the chat. Would be really grateful if you could take a couple minutes and fill out that survey and let us know what you think. At this point, we're gonna jump out into the breakout rooms to go a little bit deeper on 2 different topics. So again, it's DAGs and metadata and lineage. If you got a good DAG pun that you're sitting on, join Bar and I in the staging breakout 1 channel. If you're interested in thinking about workflows and jobs as code and DBT build and things of that nature, definitely do join Julia and Jeremy to talk about that some more too. And you know, really just want to take this last opportunity to plug Coalesce one more time. It has been really fun looking at all the submitted talks and working with folks and putting together a fantastic event. So one last time, if you haven't signed up for Coalesce yet, please do that soon, and we'd love to see you there. So with that, we're going to jump into the breakout rooms. I'll catch you in DAGs and metadata and lineage. Or have a good time talking to Jeremy and Julia too. Thanks, everyone.